Hello everyone, um, hoping you are doing great. I'm also doing good this side. So in our previous video we covered about the Boolean logic, the control structures, while we talked about JavaScript operations. We looked at assignment operators, arithmetic operators, logic operators, comparison operators, and all those good stuff. And we even went ahead and did string concatenation and all that kind of stuff. If you remember, in our last video we covered a number of things. So in that video, if you have not watched it, it was the second video. So in our first video we looked at the introduction to JavaScript. It was our first video, and then in the second video we looked at the control structures and the condition logic. Went ahead and did some sort of concatenation. So the video is there on YouTube. Just go through it. It is comprehensive. It is comprehensive. You can just go back and watch that one if you missed it. So in today's video, or in today's lecture, we are going to look at continue to see the control structures. I know we talked about the if statement for a bit, so today we're going to look at the control structures, and then we will end up looking also at the functions. Okay, we're going to start at the functions. Functions is a big thing, but in today's lecture we're going to simply have the introduction on seeing the if statements, and then the switch statement, and then the functions. Okay, we are going to talk about 3 things in this video. Okay, so let's start. So in the first place, what are the control structures? So the control structures are used to control the flow of a program based on certain conditions. In JavaScript, there are several control structures that you can use, and the most common ones is the if statement and the switch statement. And if you remember very well, in the last video we talked about the if statement. We used the if statement in some of the scenarios, and if statement is not hard because it is typical like English. When you are talking to a person in terms of if statement, I think it is something we use in our daily lives. If it is not there, don't do this. If it is there, do this. So we use the if statement more often in our daily lives, and that's why when you are doing it in JavaScript, we don't actually change it. It is the same thing, and that's why you can easily connect with it, and it is easy to understand. So in this example, for instance, if you had x equal to 10, and then you are asking yourself if x is greater than 0. Okay, so you see we have some sort of a comparison inside there. So if x is greater than 0, then you can console.log that x is positive. Okay, so in this code you said the output x is going to be positive to the console because the condition x greater than 0 is true, because x is 10 and you're asking if x is greater than 0, this one is going to be true, and if it is true, it is going to do console.log x is positive. So if statement is not that hard, but we have to cover it, and we know how to take advantage of it in most of the scenarios when you are doing JavaScript. So you can use the ls clause to specify a block of code that should be executed if the condition is false. So not all the time that the condition is going to be true, and that is why you compare in the first place, because there is a possibility that the condition is not true. So for instance, in this case, if x is equal to negative 10, so x greater than 0 is false, it is not true. Okay, so in the we have the first condition. We had if x is greater than 0, then console.log x is positive, else console.log x is not positive, or x is negative. So you can say that the code will output x is not positive to the console because the condition x greater than 0 is false. So we use the else part to specify that condition that will be executed if the condition is false. Okay, so that one is very to understand, and we can go ahead and we do one example. Okay, we do one example. Okay, so I'm just going to go to my folder here and create a new folder. Let me just say introduction to JS, introduction to JS lesson 3. Okay, so open this in VS Code. Okay, so let's open our VS Code right now. Opening our VS Code. Sometimes it can take some time, be patient. So if you are finding these videos very useful, please always like, subscribe, so that you can support the channel and we'll be able to make more content for you. Why I make particularly this kind of series is that when I was starting up learning on internet, most of the tutorials, they make them so fast, they are summarized, they don't explain extensively these kind of concepts, and that's why you see our videos, they take somehow longer, but we are explaining concepts in deeper detail so that you can really understand the concepts. Okay, so take your time. These are just like beginner friendly videos. If you are advanced, you can join us later, or you can still go through and see if there's any concept you are missing. But these ones are absolute beginners, and those ones are in the middle of the series. As we are continuing the series, we are going to have about, I think, 15 and above projects that you're going to start be doing, so that we really understand JavaScript in practice. So that part, when it reaches, we are going to be uploading one video or 2 videos per week, depending on the time. But always just you can put the notification bell. Make sure when you have subscribed, hit that notification bell, so that if the new video comes, at least you are notified about it. Okay, so here basically I'm creating my 2 files. I'm creating index.html for the HTML part, and then I went ahead creating app.js. So app.js is going to hold our JavaScript. Okay, so you can go ahead and also do CSS, but you are not much interested in CSS. Okay, we will see the part of CSS when we start doing the real projects. Okay, so for now, let's focus on understanding the basics of JavaScript, and then later on, we just see how 3 of them work together. Okay, so this normally takes some time for me when it is just like the morning, opening the first time. Just be patient with me. Okay, so finally we are there. Okay, so I'm just going to say this is so today we're going to look at control structures. Okay, control structures and functions. So we're going to start on functions. How much we will not finish them, but we start on them anyways. Okay, so now with the only thing we do here in the head is we link our JavaScript. So just say script, okay, script source, and just say app.js, and then add the far keyword so that it is loaded last. Okay, so I can just go and put h1, and then I say maybe control structures and functions as a heading. Okay, and then I can even go live. So simply click on go live, And if you don't have this is just a live server extension. You can always just come here and install. Okay, so install this one, and then you have this go live. Okay, so I'm just going live. Meanwhile, let's just go to JavaScript and always test. Okay, so it is there, so you can always just test here in the console. Okay, so in the console here. Okay, so you can test, for instance, console.log, console.log, it's working. So always the first thing you do, you test that your JavaScript is well connected, and if you see it in the console here, it is working and it is well connected. So we can now continue and start our journey. Okay, so control structures, they are divided into two. Okay, so I'm just going to actually cut this, put it in here. I'm just going to make a marked comment or marked line, and we have control structures, and I divided into two. So we can go to look at the if statements. Okay, if statements, and then we have also the switch statements. Okay, switch statements. Okay, this is great. So let's start with the if statements. So down here, I'm just going to put if statement or if statements. Okay, so let's start by saying, for instance, if we have x equal to -10, and if I just say 10, okay, and we can check if x is greater than 10. Okay, if that is true, then we could console.log, console.log, we could just say x is positive. Could say x is positive. Okay, so like so, x is positive. And if we check in the console here, if you check, let me just do this. Let's do again and see if x is console.log, x is positive, and it seems like it is not doing anything. Let me just refresh. Really, const x is positive and x is 10. Oh, so okay, so x is 10. So if you say x is greater than 10, then this is not the condition. The condition is x greater than 0. Okay, so if x is greater than 0, you say x is positive, and yeah, now it can do x is positive. Sorry, those who had noticed it, I think that was great. So if x is greater than 0, then we can just say x is positive. So we can see we can now use the data to make some sort of decisions. Okay, so we can make a decision that if x is greater than 0, then it is do this. Okay, so we saw that we can also this one, if this condition here is only executed if this clause is positive, or if this condition in this bracket is positive. So what if it is here false? So we can use the else to tap if x is if this condition is false. Okay, so let's put -10 this time. So if x is greater than 0, it will be console.log x is positive. Else, that means x is not positive, or x is negative. So you could just say that. Okay, maybe x is negative or is not positive, which is just basically negative. Okay, so if you just look in the console now, x is not positive. Okay, yeah, so this is great already. So just to make it very interesting, so this is our first example. So I'm just going to also come here and say const y is equal to 50, okay, and then we could say also const z is equal to 100, okay. So we want to perform an operation of subtraction, okay. Want to subtract, but we always want to get a positive number. So want to say if y is greater than z, we say y minus z, or we could just say if z is greater than y, then we say z minus y, okay. So for instance, we could say if, okay, if y is greater than z, okay, we could go ahead and say, for instance, console.log y minus z, okay, like so. Else we could just say console.log z minus y, okay. So you can see that like we have our y here, it is this, and you know, so if y is greater than z, okay, which is not, so if this is true, it's going to execute this. If this is not true, or if this is false, it will execute the else part. So if you check right now, x is 50 because it is z minus y. Okay, great. This is we are doing well. So you see the if statement is not actually hard at all, and it is a good thing. So of course you can inside the if statement you can put another if statement, okay. So for instance we can say so if z, so for instance this z is we are saying if z, if y is greater than z, if this is true, do this, or else do this. So we could just go ahead and we do another if statement, okay. So for instance here we can just say else, and we can ask another if statement within an if statement, okay. So we could ask now if z, so in this case of course z will be divisible, or will be now larger than y, okay. So we could say, we could go ahead and say if z divided, okay. So we could just say, for instance, if z is divisible by 2, so we could say z modulus 2, if this is equal to 0, then you could also console.log, okay. You could just say console.log that z is divisible by 2, is divisible by 2, like so. And you could also just go ahead and also console.log x minus y. It has no problem doing many things at once. So just in that case you can see to just say x z is divisible by 2, and it does go ahead and does the calculation, okay. So in the if statement one, we can have nested if statements, so you can go ahead and do something like this. However, you can also go ahead and do, for instance, if we had const color is equal to red. So if the color is red, and we could say, for instance, if color is equal to red, okay. So if the color is red, we could just say console.log color is red, okay. We could do that, Now you can see the colors are so many. Colors can be so many. So for instance, we could just go here, and instead of saying else, we could say else if. Okay, we could say else if color, for instance, is equal to blue. Okay, if the color is equal to blue, we could just say console.log color is blue. Color is blue. As simple as that. You could just say, and you could just continue with this. You could just put another else if color is green, and you could just come here and console.log color is what? Color is green. You see? And then lastly, you could just say else, and you say console.log color is not green or blue or red. Okay, so you can see you can have multiple conditions. So instead of using nested if statements, you can have this block called else if. There is a space here, guys, so don't do this. There's a space. So there's else if. So else if you take in another condition. So you can have multiple conditions, or you can have several conditions that you are considering, and we can use this kind of scenario where we are having else if. Okay, so color right now is red. If we go there in the console, it's going to say color is red. Okay, color is red. And maybe you could just change the background color. So you can ask maybe user to type in the color, or to say what is your favorite color, and it says green, and maybe you change the background of the body to be green. Okay, we reach that side whereby we can manipulate the HTML and make beautiful things. Okay, so this is already great. This is great. So let's see the switch statement. So the second one is a switch statement. Okay, so the switch statement actually is almost the same as the if statement, most especially if you have multiple conditions like this one. Okay, so if we had a multiple condition like this one, we could, instead of using this else if, we could use a switch statement to replace something like this. So how do you write a switch statement? So a switch statement, you start having your variable you want to consider. So for instance, const my color. So just to define another one, we can just say my color, and let's start with red the way we did in the previous one. Okay, so you say const my color is red. Okay, so now at this point, let's just go ahead and see how we write a switch statement. So a switch statement, you come here and you say switch. Okay, switch, and what are we switching? We are switching my color. Okay, we are switching my color. So we are looking at the cases. What are the possibilities the colors can be? So for instance, we could have the first case. Okay, so you could have case where the color is red. Okay, so if the color is red, okay, when the color is red, we could just say console.log color is red. Okay, and then we break. If this is true, we break off. And what does the break do? So the break keyword means that terminate or stop from there, don't continue seeing any other code down. Okay, so we could just simply copy this and let me paste it here. So now another case, if the syntax, this is actually the syntax. We use the keyword case to change or to look at another condition. So for instance, in the if statement, we say the if color is red. So since here we are switching my color, so we start with the cases or the scenarios or the possibilities that this color can be. So in the first case, it can be red. So if the color is red, that's why we define like say case. We use this keyword case and we say red. So if the case or if this color is red, then do this. And to not continue to the other colors, so here we go to blue, and we could just say console.log blue. So not continue to this case, we simply break, and the is going to run up to here and we stop there. If the color is red, it will not exceed here. If this condition is not true, if it is not this case, it will proceed to the second case, and it will proceed to the third case, like that, like that. It will continue with all these cases, and it is indentation sensitive. Okay, you can see how I'm writing. It is indentation sensitive. You have to put these cons. Okay, and then you have to go down here. They cannot be on the same line like this. You see, if when you save, VS Code actually helps you to align them. So VS Code does great job to align for you these cases. Okay, so if it is green here, we could say color is green. Okay, and then we can have also a default case. Okay, so we could just say default console.log color is neither of the above. Color is neither of the above. Okay, just to so that it is not any or either blue or green or any of the above. So how the switch statement works, it takes in a variable that you want to look at a number of scenarios. Okay, so maybe like my color, and in the first it can be red, and then if you switch, for instance, this variable here, we bring this variable, we put here in the switch statement, and then we start considering scenarios. So in the first case, if my color is red, do this. Okay, and if this is true, just break and don't continue to other scenarios. If this scenario is not true, proceed to the second scenario. If this is not true, proceed to the third scenario. And if all scenarios above are not true, then just do this default. So the default statement actually, its purpose is to say if all other scenarios have not worked, then do this, just like the way we do in else. Okay, so you just test it out. So we can go to the console and you can see that color is red, and you can even just maybe put this one off. You can put this one off, but they just change like this one to yellow, so that it is giving a different answer. And then for this one, let's change it to blue. Okay, so we change it to blue, and you see that yeah, it's saying color is blue on line 51. Okay, so that is great. Maybe you could go ahead and do one more example about switch statement. For instance, we can switch the number of days. So for instance, const day, maybe today is Monday. Okay, and you could just go and switch. Okay, switch. And by the way, JavaScript has this built-in switch statement whereby they give you all this whole thing written out. So if I click on switch like that, they give you the starting point like so. So for instance, the key is this variable, which is the day. We are going to be switching the day. Okay, and the first case, you take in the value that is going to be on this variable. So the first value can be, for instance, Monday. Okay, So you could just say Monday. So if this is true, we could just console.log the day is Monday. The day is Monday. Okay, if this is not true, you can write another case. So you can go ahead and write all the seven cases. Let me just write down some of the cases, like maybe 3 or 4. Okay, save this, and VS Code is going to help you to indent it. You see, this indentation matters a lot. This must be inside this case very well, like this. It has a similar syntax like Python. Python don't uses this kind of syntax, indentation like this. But let's just continue. So in the first case, if it is Monday, just console.log the day is Monday. If in the second case, for instance, it is Tuesday, okay, just the day is Tuesday, okay, and we could just look also Wednesday. So if it is Wednesday, then the day is Wednesday, okay. If then it is Thursday, so here you could just try Thursday, and the day is Thursday, okay. Then we could just try Friday, and then here you say the day is Friday, okay. Day is Friday, and then we could just say Saturday, and the day is Saturday. And then now you can, the default, or it can be just the default, we could just say console.log the day is Sunday, because if the day is not from Monday up to Saturday, then probably it is Sunday, okay. So default, we could just say console.log the day is Sunday if all the above cases do not qualify. So it looks at this one, the value you are giving in right now, the day is Monday, and it starts like tracing this value for the key you have passed here, and the key is this variable you have created here, like the day, and then it starts looking at these. It starts looking at these scenarios. So in the first case, if the case is Monday, it will do console.log the day is Monday, and if this is true, it will just simply stop there. And then if this is not true, it goes to the second case, which is Tuesday. If this is not true, it goes to Wednesday, Thursday, like so and so forth, until it finishes all the cases. If they were all not true, then it is going to return the default one, which is Sunday, okay. So you can see right now the day is Monday, okay. So if we go and change this one to Tuesday, okay, you can see the day is Tuesday, okay. The day is Tuesday, and of course we could just go ahead and make this one dynamic, like it comes from the user. So last time we saw something called prompt, so we could prompt the user to enter the day, okay. So we could just say, for instance, prompt, and then we just say what is the day of the week, okay. We could just go ahead and ask the user enter the day of the week, simple as that, okay. The day of the week, and when you go to the browser, you can see enter the day of the week. So if you say Wednesday, like so, is that the spelling of Wednesday, like so, and you see the day is Wednesday. So it is getting the variable there, and it feeds it in here, and then it brings it here, and it starts analyzing these cases, okay. So of course the first problem we run into is if we run this and we put Monday, and this one works perfectly. The day is Monday, this is good. But then if someone puts in capital letters the day Monday, you realize that this is not going to work. It's going to bring the last case that the day is Sunday. And probably here we could just make another case for Sunday. Okay, we could make another case for Sunday like so, and here we put Sunday, the day is Sunday here, and we could, the default will be please enter a valid date. Yeah, that would be a good statement. Please enter a valid date, so that we know it must lie in one of the days. So if we put now Sunday, so it just say the day is Sunday. This is great. But now notice if someone puts capital letters Sunday like so, it will tell him please enter a valid date. But he has put just the capital letters and it is a valid date. So we could look at one function that can help us to do that. So you see here we are getting the date. So what we can ensure is, you see that our cases are all in small letters. You see that? Our cases are all in small letters, but what we are comparing here, if this one is in capital letters, it will not match with this one. Okay? So what we can do is we can get this one, the one we have gotten here, and we can convert this into small letter. So how do we turn a string that is being capital letter and we turn it into small letter? So we use one JavaScript function which says to lowercase. Okay, so this function, its purpose, it gets a string, this one, and then it will convert it into lowercase. Okay, so to lowercase is a function, if you hover it, you can see converts all the alphabetic characters in a string to lowercase. So you can see this is what this method does. So now even if we put in capital letters like Sunday, so it will get this word and it will convert it into small letters, and then it compares it, and you can see the day is Sunday. As simple as that, you have solved the problem. Okay, great. This is good. We're having good progress. We have done 2 examples about a number of examples on the if statement and a number of examples on the switch statement. Okay, so allow me to switch to functions. So just going to create here another JavaScript, and I'm just going to call it functions.js. This is just to help us not to rub all what you have done in the other one. Okay, so I'm just going back to the index, and instead here I'm just going to put functions.js, and I can close up this up, and under the functions I can just say console.log. It is working as usual. It's working, just to check if it has connected to functions very well, and we can stop the server and start it again to make sure we are loading a right script. So right click and check the console, and it is saying it's working. Okay, so this is great. Okay, so let me just go back to my notes here. Okay, and we have looked at all these ones, the control structures. We want to go to look at loops. Let's move to functions. Down here we are going to come back to loops later on. Okay, so what are JavaScript functions? So at this point, before I explain JavaScript functions, is that I want you to imagine your remote that you use at home when you are watching maybe channels on the TV. So you have this remote that is having a number of buttons, each button doing a specific task. If you want to pause maybe the video, or you want to play the video, or you want to go next, or you want to select another channel. So you see we have like 100 buttons, or you have a lot of buttons on that remote, and each button is doing a specific task. Okay, in fact, like each of the buttons is doing a specific function. Like those ones are the ones we normally call. You have had like the phones, people saying, what is the functionalities, what are special functionalities that this phone has. So a function is a block of code that performs a specific task. Okay, as simple as that. A block of code that performs a specific task, and this function can be reused throughout your code. So functions are important aspect of JavaScript, and we use them to structure and organize your code in a logical and reusable way. Okay, so functions are very useful, and let's just dive in and we see how do we write these functions and how useful they can become in improving how we have been writing our code so far. Okay, so there are very many types of functions, but in this lecture we are going to stick to function declarations. So we have very many types. We have function declaration functions, we have function expressions, and we have arrow functions. These are the most common ones, the three ones. But in this lecture, let's stick to function declarations. In the next lecture, we are going to look at the other two types. But in this one, let's stick to function declarations. So what are function declarations? So function declarations are created using the function keyword, followed by the function name and a set of parentheses that may include parameters. Okay, so the function body is placed between the curly braces. Function declarations are hoisted, which means that they are available to use throughout your code even before they are defined. Okay, we're going to see what that one means. But you could say that a function is defined by like three parts. Okay, so the first part is that you have to specify the keyword function to tell JavaScript that I'm going to write a function, and then that function you give it a name. Okay, so maybe you say hello, and it's going to be doing say hello, and then you put in or you follow it with set of parentheses, and these parentheses, they can contain something or not contain anything, and then followed by the curly braces where we write now what the function does. Okay, so let's just dive in and do some examples so that you can understand what I'm meaning completely. Okay, so the first thing we said, so I'm just going to write here functions. Okay, and in functions, in fact, let me just write a multi-line comment here by doing this, and let me put this one inside functions. And the first one you're going to look at are function declarations. Function declaration. Okay, so function declaration is the first type of function that you are going to look at. Okay, so we said you define it by like three parts. So the first part, you mention the function keyword, okay, followed by the name of the function. Maybe it's going to be saying say hello, so I'm just going to say hello, and then by a set of parentheses, and you could just say console.log hello, good morning. Good morning. Okay, so this is a function, a complete function. It has a function keyword, it has a function name, and this naming follows the same way we name variables. So the function names, they should be meaningful. You should use camel casing when you are naming them. The same rules that guide creation of variable names are the same rules that guide the creation of function names. Okay, so the function says say hello is the name of the function, and here it is saying consoling on the console.log, hello, good morning. Okay, as simple as that. So if we check in our console, at this point is actually not doing anything. You can see the console is very clean. It is nothing it is doing. So I want you to remember that we said functions like they are just like on your remote. On the remote, if you don't click any button on the remote will not do any function. Functions are triggered or they are invoked, okay, or they are called. So they're just looking at how do we call or how do we invoke a function. This simply means that we declare the function or we define the function here, but then we have to use the function. So how do I use this function? So how we use the function, simply call its name or write down its name. So the name of this function is say hello. So simply copy it there and paste it here. As simple as that. So when I paste it here, and remember you must put this parenthesis. If you do this, only this, it will not do anything and it is going to do nothing. There is nothing you have done. But if you put a set of parentheses like so, it means that you are calling this function to operate. So when we call it and we go to the browser, you see hello, good morning. Okay, so this is great. You see our function we defined here, we came and called it here and it is doing some work. Okay, now this doesn't of course do much of now, but this is powerful. Functions can be powerful. So you can pass in some things here. Okay, so for instance, if you wanted to say that this message it is saying here, it shouldn't just be like hello, good morning. We could make this statement dynamic, or we could get this statement from the user. Instead of saying we rely on it, we could get this statement from the user. So how do we do that? So for instance, we want to could say something like hi, I wish you good, maybe good day. So this would be the message I want it to say. Okay, I would want to pass in the message. I call this function, I pass in a message like this: hi, I wish you a good day. Maybe this is the message I want to tell the user. Okay, so how do we make this function to receive the message? So you simply come to the function here. So you see here the function is just like this. You could say I wish that the function should be receiving a message. Okay, so when you pass in a message here, this one is what we call an argument, or we call it a parameter. So if you just hover on it, you see VS Code is showing us that this is a parameter, message, and you can see here message is declared but its value is never used. So when you pass in a message like this, you have created a variable called message in this function. By default, when you pass in a parameter or an argument, this one you have defined a variable called message. And even if we at this point, we could just console.log here message, as simple as that. Console.log message, you see. So now if we run this, it is going to say hi, I wish you a good day. So this is the message, and you told the function here that I wish to pass the message, and when I pass a message, please console that message, console.log the message I'm passing. Okay, as simple as that. So you come here and pass a message, and as usual, of course, we could make this message dynamic. You know that we could make this message dynamic. So for instance, we could say const message is equal to prompt. Yeah, so you know we are using prompt. So in the future you're going to be using a form, but for now let's be using prompt. Okay, so we just say prompt for instance, and we could just say write your message, write your message. Okay, write your message here. Okay, and then instead of passing here just like that, we could just come here and we pass in the message. Okay, we can pass in the message like so. Okay, so you can see now the steps it is going to take through is going to go to this function. It is not doing anything. It comes here and it sees there is this variable that is requiring to pass in a message. You pass in a message, okay, and this message is passed through to this say hello function. So this message is brought here. In fact, I just, to avoid the confusion, I could call this one my message or user message. Let's just say this one is user message, so that you don't get confused. So this is a user message we are getting from the user, and then we can pass this message to this function because the function receives messages. So when you pass in a message like this, it will carry this message, puts it in here, and then it will console it here. Okay, so let's just see how this one works. So I want to say, for instance, hi, good morning. Let's say hi, comma, good morning. And if I say click OK, and you see hi, good morning. So if I load again and I pass another message, hello, how are you? A message that's like that, hello, how are you? And you can see we are seeing this message here on the console, and you can see even says functions at line 7. Okay, you can see the function we are running it on line 12, but it is consoling on line 7. So it is telling you, it gets the message, feeds into this say hello function, and this say hello function is up here. Okay, it is up here and takes in a message that you passed here, and then it comes, gets this message, and then consoles it down. Okay, so this is great. So one, we have just at this point noticed that we can create a function. That is one thing. The second thing is that we can pass parameters within a function. Okay, and the third thing is that we know how to invoke a function. Okay, so let's just do more examples about functions. I'm just going to do one or two examples, and we call it a day, or we come to the end of this video. So let's just say you have a scenario whereby you want to create a program. So normally they will just write for you a question like this: create a program, okay, that takes in two arguments, that takes two parameters, maybe two parameters or two numbers. Okay, just say it takes in two numbers. Okay, takes two numbers, and then it returns the sum. Okay, and it returns their sum, like this, the sum of two numbers. In fact, you could say write a function or write a program that takes two parameters and it returns their sum, or two numbers and returns their sum. Okay, I remember in our coding challenges, I think this was one of the challenges. I don't know if I could pull up this challenge at some point. We had this as one of the coding challenges in the first time. I'm not sure if I could get where it is. Let me see this one. I think this is something else, but there is where we had the coding challenges. It is not that one. Let me see if I could get it. Okay, so I cannot just, maybe it is here, daily challenge. So we had daily challenges, you can see here, like convert minutes into seconds, where they say create a function that takes an integer minutes and converts it into seconds. Okay, and this one, this kind of challenges, is this one now a function can handle this kind of challenge. Okay, I think this one I should leave it as an exercise, but for now let's just see if we can do a program, or when they say create a program, this can simply mean also a function. Okay, this can also mean a function. So create a program or a function that takes two numbers and returns their sum. Okay, so we could just say, come and say function, and the first thing is to give it a name. So what is it going to be doing? It's going to be doing a sum. Okay, so you could just create a sum like that, and they say it takes in two numbers. Okay, it takes in two numbers, and you can say number 1 and number 2, and then they say it returns their sum. Okay, so you can just even call this one sum of two numbers. Sum of two numbers. Just give your functions names that make sense. Sum of two numbers, and I'm just going for now put down this one so that it doesn't fall every time we load the browser. Sum of two numbers, and takes in number 1 and number 2. So what do we want to do with this one? Okay, so what we would do is, for instance, we could calculate the sum. You could come inside and say const sum is equal to number 1 plus number 2. As simple as that. You want to add number 1 to number 2, and you get a sum, and we could console.log the sum. As simple as that. And that's what the function requires of us. It says write a function or a program that takes two numbers, and you can see we're accepting number 1 and number 2, and it returns their sum. And so we say the sum is number 1 plus number 2, and you can see we are consoling.log sum. So if we go to the browser, of course this won't do anything. Okay, this won't do anything in the browser because we haven't invoked this function. So how do we invoke this function, or how do we call this function? We could just say sum of two numbers, and we can pass two numbers. For instance, we have say 2, 3. Okay, so if you pass 2 and 3, so it will take number 1 and number 2. This is number 1 and number 2. So you say number 1, it is B2, and number 2 is B3. So if I just go to the, you see, it consoles 5. Okay, so let's pass another one, maybe a big one, 20 and 30. Okay, so 20 plus 30 should be 50. And what are 50? So you see, we have done a function that does some things. Okay, it does something. Okay, but now let's just for instance look at another one more, and we call it a day. So just going to write also another program. So for instance, you say write a program. So you can say write a program that calculates area of a triangle, something like that. Area of a triangle. So sometimes they won't, if you are just talking to a client, the client will not tell you the parameters. Okay, you can see like here they gave us a hint of the parameters. They said the function takes into parameters and returns their sum. So they gave you a hint of what is going to be these arguments here, or the parameters in here in this parenthesis, but sometimes you have to figure it by yourself. Okay, so for instance here they say write a program that calculates area of a triangle. So of course you have to first know the science behind, for instance, how do we calculate area of a triangle before even you go ahead and do that. So for instance, I would say so if write this, so like for instance, area of a triangle, area is equal to a half times base times height. So for instance, this formula, you should know it, and if you don't know it, you can simply Google it. So when a client gives you and says, I want a program that does a particular task, maybe it calculates the simple interest or a compound interest, you can simply Google it on the internet and just come to have the formula. Now, from the formula, analyze the formula and see what are the parameters or what are the dependent factors that this formula is depending on. So for instance, area of a triangle, it is a half times base times height. So you can see that these other ones, like a half is not, a half is a constant, okay? Those ones who know, who did their math, they know that a half like is a constant, so it cannot be affecting area because it is constant. But what is changing here is the base and the height. So if a base changes, it can change the area. If the height changes, it can change the area. So those ones become the dependencies, or they become the parameters that we are going to be looking up to. Okay, so down after you have got the formula of whatever a task you're going to be doing, you can go ahead and now write a function that does the task. So for instance, you put just a function area of a triangle like so, and then inside here we pass in the dependencies, or we pass in the parameters upon which this area of a triangle is based on. So for instance, it is based on base and height. You use base and height to calculate the area of a triangle. Then inside here you could just come and say const area, and you say area is a half is 0.5 times base, then times height, as simple as that. And now after we have gotten our area, we can console.log area. Okay, we can console.log area, as simple as that. So right now this function won't do anything. The only thing we can do now, we can invoke it. So to invoke this function, simply call it down here and say, for instance, area of a triangle, and then pass in two figures that you wish to calculate. So pass in the base and height. So let's pass in base and height. So base, let's say maybe base is going to be, let's just first pass in something that we can calculate off our head. So if the base is 4 and the height is 2, so it will be like 0.5 times 2 times 4 times 2. Okay, this one should give us something like 4, I guess. Okay, so you can see we have 4. Okay, this is great. So at this point we have managed to get a question from a user. A user requested us to write a program that calculates area of a triangle. We tried to break it down somehow to get the formula first, and then from the formula get the parameters that you are going to pass in here. Then go ahead and write the function itself, and then lastly execute the function. Okay, so please allow me, we come to the end of this lecture, and to those ones who have not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. You can also share, and this is how you can support the channel basically, so that we can make more content. So next time we are going to continue looking at functions, looking basically on other types of functions like arrow functions and function expressions. So thank you so much for being around. See you next time.